I'm Andrew Taylor. I'm the director of the Arts Management Program, along with my faculty colleagues. Being director just means I'm sort of, what is it called? Chief among equals. I get to do a little extra stuff, but we're all working together to make this program work. I wanted to welcome you to this celebration, and we're having multiple celebrations of 50 years of this program, because we started way back in, I'm seeing people in the room. I'm very excited to see them. In the fall of '74. Valerie Morris started this program at the ripe age of 26, which is amazing. So she came and was like, let's start a program. And she started it. So on October 28th, we're having another conversation in this room, followed by a reception in the AU Museum. And at that, Valerie will be present for that, and we can hear from her. And we'll have a set of 4 alumni come in from Philly, New York, in the DC area to talk about arts leadership. Past, present, and future, sort of a Christmas Carol kind of energy. But today we're extraordinarily gifted to have Joy with us, and you'll get an introduction from our dean. First, I wanted to acknowledge the land we are upon as the unceded territory of the Piscataway people, and acknowledging the city and much of this university was built on stolen land with stolen hands, and we need to acknowledge the extraordinary stewardship of those who came before us and held this land in trust. And we have to behave in a way that respects and provides dignity to the world to honor what they gave and what they gave up for us to stand here today. So first I wanted to acknowledge that space. And then I wanted to acknowledge our dean. How's this? Good transition. Dean Linda Aldoory is here to welcome you as well. She joined us in 2022 from UMD College Park. And she's really helped the College of Arts and Science. I was talking to one of the students about how this works. There's departments. Departments are in colleges. Colleges have deans. And then there's, how many colleges? 5? 7 colleges. And all those colleges come together in some sort of a federated state kind of thing. And then there's a provost president. So dean is really important to us because she leads the largest college on campus, the College of Arts and Science, of which performing arts is part. And I'm really thrilled to welcome Linda to welcome you and then to introduce our guest, Joy. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all for including me today. I really appreciate it. I'm so excited to be here for the Arts Management Program 50th anniversary. I cannot believe 50 years. Can we just get a clap for that? That is really impressive. I've only had a chance to be with American University for 2 years, as Andrew said, so I am learning and growing myself as we go along, and so I continue to learn from our guests and our students and our professors myself. And what I have learned is that more than 600 students have graduated from the program since its inception. And of course, such as the guest speaker, which I will be introducing in a minute, the alumni make impactful contributions to the creative lives of community all over the world. The program's faculty, I have to say, both present and past faculty, are recognized leaders in advancing student success and defining and redefining the professional practice for arts management. And then we can't forget the amazing students. Let's give you a clap. Both past and present, and of course, I think we want to say future. I think we might have a future student here, right? A guest. I overheard we have some guests that might be visiting us. You're all really amazing, and you're entering this program each year as engaged agents of positive change for the communities that one day you will work with and in, and we really thank you for that. Tonight, we celebrate and recognize the accomplishments of the program. And before we kick it off, I just want to take a moment to let you know how much this program, this event, and the arts management degree aligns with the College of Arts and Sciences and its vision and mission. The college prepares students for lives of purpose, service, and leadership by delivering a world-class liberal arts and sciences education rooted in diverse perspectives and experiential learning, with innovative and inclusive curricula in 19 departments, and applied training from over 460 faculty in the humanities, arts, social sciences, and sciences. As you all well know, you acquire many skills, not just in arts management, but in critical thinking, problem solving, as well as creativity. And with that, part of our mission is also to introduce and re-engage alumni and guests. And so I get the distinct pleasure of introducing our featured speaker for the night, Joy Bailey-Bryant. Now, I think all of you know this, but she is actually an alumna of the program, graduating with her master's in 2004. She is president and managing partner of Lord Cultural Resources, a global practice leader in cultural sector planning. In her role, she has been integral to the development of hundreds of cultural spaces, such as museums, parks, gardens, and libraries. And I've learned it actually started with museums.
Absolutely.
And then it has expanded into many other areas. Now, locally, Ms. Bailey-Bryant has led planning teams for remarkable projects like the Lucas Museum of Narrative Art and the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And around the country, she has led citywide engagement in huge cities like Dallas and Chicago, but also other cities like Decatur, Georgia, and smaller communities. Other notable projects have included the Charlotte Arts and Culture Plan, Brooklyn Botanical Garden, which I used to live right next to, very beautiful space, and the New York Public Library, as well as the National September 11th Memorial and Museum at the World Trade Center. Please join me in welcoming this special eagle back to the nest, Ms. Bailey-Bryant.
Thank you so much, Dean, for that welcome back to the nest. It does feel good. I feel very enveloped, if you will. And it's just really wonderful. I had an opportunity to walk with Andrew around the campus, and I was telling a few of you, this building was not here when I was in the program. So I feel really like the program has arrived. When I came into this building, I just saw just the beautiful rotunda and the spaces that you have to engage with one another, and just thought, wow, this is pretty lovely. I made a good choice because the program is living on and growing. So I appreciate you all welcoming me back, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. So one of the things that I want to make sure you know is that this is a conversation. I'm going to share some information. I want you to feel free in the course of the conversation. I think I'll do the presentation, and then Andrew and I are going to have a bit of a conversation. Please do, if you have questions about anything I showed, write it down, ask questions. I'll try and move faster, but I won't try and move too fast. But I'll try and move faster so we can get to the conversation period, because I'd really like to engage with you and just talk more about, this is a learning for me as well, right? As we're going through generations of time, what are people wanting and needing as they're moving into cultural spaces? We're post-pandemic now. Are we really post-pandemic now? But we're in this space. How are we living? How is culture influencing our lives and changing our lives as we move through this space? So that's actually what this talk is really about. How do we, as cultural workers, make the world a better place through culture? I truly believe that. I've dedicated my life's work to this work. I do think that culture and the arts are really integral in making this world a better place. So let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit more about what that means. So Andrew actually did one of the best land acknowledgments I think I've experienced in a long time. And I actually want to just take a moment to encourage you, wherever you are in your places, to also do a land acknowledgement. When you start your conversation, it actually does help the culture of the space that you're in to acknowledge that there was someone before you that is the reason that you are on this land, that stewarded this land. So I am coming to you from the historic and heritage lands of the Lenape people in my home of New York and my office location of New York City. So I also share that too, because I was afraid, I have to say, to do a land acknowledgement when I first started working and doing public speaking and conversation, because it felt disingenuous to me. It felt like maybe I was just doing something that was form or rote. But in reality, I started to recognize it is saying that I am not the most important person in the room. And that creates a culture of acknowledgement. So that's kind of the first lesson. Culture can help you to acknowledge. Acknowledgement is important, right? Saying the names. So that's first lesson. Remember that one. So I put this slide here because Andrew said you all wanted to hear a little bit, you'd want to hear a little bit about my journey. And I am very proud of being an American Eagle. I feel like Christopher Columbus found this school. I had never heard of American University until I moved to Washington, D.C. I had gotten my undergraduate degree at Florida A&M University. I was had a lot of things happening. I had worked in art galleries. I was working at National Geographic Society. I had been to the State Department interning and had gotten a job there. But I really was still not feeling my passion. I didn't understand where I really could fit in. And then, as I said, American University, specifically the arts management program, turned out to be absolutely the best space for me, because it was so much, I could explore many areas of generality, right? I had been a theater minor in undergrad. I had worked in arts galleries and museum spaces. So I was trying to figure out, am I a performance person? Am I in museums? Where should I be? Arts management gave me the opportunity to explore so much of that. Very early in the process, I expressed that I wanted to leave my job at National Geographic. And one of my classmates came up to me and said, hey, they're hiring at IMLS, which is the Institute of Museum and Library Services. Let me give you a tip. IMLS is one of the smallest government agencies, and they give grants to museums and libraries all across this nation. I had the opportunity in that job to see so many amazing spaces and places. Some of them I actually got a chance to go to, but I worked with the staffs of those museums. Particularly, I was in the Office of Museum Services. And it was just such an amazing experience that came through a student here saying, IMLS is hiring. Why don't you look at them? Okay. So it was such a great space. Follow on that. I'm finishing the program. I'm finishing the coursework, and Shervin is here. I can call her name and say, I actually finished my coursework. Maybe I shouldn't tell that story. Point is, I finished with Shervin's help. I did finish. I did finish my thesis. See, we had to do a thesis at that time. And after finishing, another classmate came to me, Renee Littleton came to me and said, I have a job at Lord Cultural Resources. Again, another space I had never heard of. They create museums. At the time, we were almost exclusively working on museums. They create museums. I am going to a fellowship at the Kennedy Center. It seems like this might be the perfect place for you, because she knew that I was working in African American cultural spaces specifically, and they were developing the August Wilson Center in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I walked into the door of Lord Cultural Resources, and I knew that I was home. Immediately, it was the place for me. So that, again, an AU, American Eagle, was absolutely influential in making sure that I landed in a space. So I started my career at Lord Cultural Resources, and I have left twice. I will tell you, I went to open a museum in Albany, Georgia, an expansion of a museum in Albany, Georgia, the Albany Civil Rights Institute. And then I was seconded to the National Museum of African American History and Culture at Smithsonian. And both of those times, I came back to Lord Cultural Resources because it was absolutely my home. And through the course of time, I am now a part owner of Lord Cultural Resources. So that journey, of which AU is a critical part, has really shaped my life. So it's just, so this is my story here. Now we're going to jump on to, why cultural is important and all of those types of things. But just to tell you, this is a great opportunity in this space. And I will say, I know that tuition ain't cheap, right? you're probably paying a lot of money to sit here, so take advantage of every single opportunity, every person, meeting everyone that you can. I know people tell you that all the time, but I'm evidence that it absolutely works, and it's absolutely necessary. So we can talk more about this on a different day, but I've had the opportunity to do things. I wrote an article, We're Not That Hard to Find, Hiring Diverse Museum Staff in AAM magazine. I've written several articles over time. Andrew, I can't get to it. I'm supposed to be writing a book. I can't. It's hard. It's too hard. It's too hard. I got to tell you got to sit down. I told you the thesis story. I didn't tell you, but there was a thesis story. There is a story, okay? Okay, so that said, just to tell you a quick bit about Lord Cultural Resources, we are a company that works across the globe creating spaces for people to feel that their stories are told, to tell their stories, to know and share with the world what is happening with them, what has happened to them, how they are help them to interact in the world. So we say that we are working with arts and cultural spaces, so museums, parks, libraries, and gardens, to ensure that they are exactly what they say. You know how people say, we are cultural assets? Well, in order to be an asset, you have to be of benefit to the communities that you serve. So the people walking around outside of your doors, we make sure that you are that. We do that through sustainability studies like business planning, strategic planning, institutional planning, audience development. How are you relating to the people who live in the communities where you are? That's my business. That's what I do every single day. I have the best job in the world. Like, honestly, I know the dean feels like she's got the best job. Andrew feels like, but I've actually have the best job in the world, I have to say. We have offices, as I said, across the world, and I do get to go to the offices. I get to work in those different spaces. And what's great about it is it's a little bit like an Airbnb commercial. Instead of going there, I get to live there because I'm experiencing the cultures of the people whose stories we're working with. We're not telling their stories. We're working with them to help to communicate their stories. So just really one of the things that I wanted to, as Andrew and I have been talking over time about what I would love to impart to you, and really, I don't want to say empower, because as people you have power inside, but I guess maybe catalyze you to feel that you can step out, and that culture, you have power as a cultural worker to really make change in any space that you are in. So I think that's really the message that I want to impart here. And I have 3 ways of doing it. We're going to talk about the ways that culture communicates value. We're going to talk about the way that culture communicates or creates space. And then the way that culture makes a place, that you can actually use culture for all of these different things, or that culture is implicit in all of these things. So this is something that you kind of may feel like is a no-brainer, but I'm going to say it because it's important to state things out loud, explicitly. So cultural spaces used to be what we would call hard power spaces, right? You would say, I have won a war. I can come into your territory. I can steal your stuff, your valuables. I can go back to my home. I can build a building, and I can put your stuff inside of my building, close the doors, and charge you to see your stuff, okay? That means I have power. So I'm object-centered. I'm looking in, and I'm saying, ooh, how powerful am I, okay? It's a very passive experience. And again, of course, it's the remnants of hard power. This is when we talk about like the ivory tower on the hill. That's kind of that image. What we know that cultural spaces must be, because let's be serious, most of the cultural spaces that we're talking about, that I work in, are not-for-profit. Not-for-profits have a public trust. They are not paying taxes on purpose, right? It's a benefit. They are supposed to be of benefit to the communities that they serve. So if you are of benefit to the communities that you serve, that means that you have to include, and you have to be speaking with, you have to be in conversation, you have to be visitor centered, right? The communities that you are in, you need to be collaborative. You have to be telling multiple stories. We can't just see things from one point of view, because who knows what the real story is. We have to understand. I can tell you so many side stories, but it's multiple perspectives is very important when we start to think about how are we understanding what has happened across communities across the world. We really want to think about the ways that people look at cities, for example. We have a book that I wrote a chapter in. I didn't write the book. Wrote a chapter in. It's called Museums, Cities, and Soft Power. And the idea is that in different municipalities, government can use culture, and this can be good and it can be bad. This is very true. Government can use culture to really portray to the public what they want you to believe about a place. So I have said, I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. Very proud of my city, very, very proud of my city. I will tell you that when I was growing up in Atlanta, it had moved from the city of Tara, if you all know Gone with the Wind. So it was, when I was growing up, Atlanta was the city of Tara, and then it was moving into this city too busy to hate, right? Because it was making this leap. So it became the city too busy to hate. And the way that it really needed to communicate that story was we're trying to move from the Civil War to civil rights, okay? So what does Atlanta have? It's the birthplace of Martin Luther King. How can we move our thinking from this Civil War kind of racist idea to this kind more welcoming city too busy to hate, all of the kind of language that you want to hear, right? Well, we're going to say, okay, we're going to build everything around Martin Luther King. So we have the King Center, we have the National Center for Civil and Human Rights. Jimmy Carter is not from Atlanta, but from the Atlanta area, opened the Carter Center. Their mission is waging peace, right? So this whole kind of construct that we as individuals have to be vigilant about, but the whole construct is helped by pushing forward our cultural spaces, right? That these are the places where we're a city too busy to hate. That's just an illustration, and you can look at different cities and see what cultural spaces they put forward or see what messaging they're putting forward, and you'll see where the cultural spaces help to kind of push that message forward. So when you're thinking about democratizing culture, you really have to understand the changing of public space in that. So let's move into, I told you we were going to do three things: culture communicating value, culture communicates value, culture creates space, and then, or place, sorry, and then culture making public space truly public. So one thing about culture creating value, I just kind of want to explain that a little bit more. When I'll just make this personal. As an African-American woman, we have done genealogy a bit on my mother's side, and in reality, it's very short. We have just the names of my mother's father's parents. That's it. That's as far back as we got, okay? We barely leave in the 1900s, okay, with that information. That's how short on my mother's side our genealogy really is. We can do the swab, and I can go further back, bloodlines or genetically, but as far as names, that is as far as I can go. As far as objects, we also have very few objects that proclaim anything about that family, that branch of the family. But what we do have are stories. We have a ton of stories. And what's great about those stories is that my mother shares them. Her 7 siblings and brothers shared them over time. And so we have been able to capture some of those stories. And so that has value to me. For many people, their story is very similar. For whatever reason, it might be through war, it might be through migration, movement of people. They don't have objects, but they have stories. So that intangibility is so important to actually say, you may not have stuff, but your story has value. And so one of the places where we are actually discovering more about even stuff is this Lumpkins jail site in Richmond, Virginia. Has anyone heard of this space, Lumpkins jail site? Okay, so right up top of this hill, so this is that bridge. If you were to look and then up the hill, it's the state capitol in Richmond. It literally is the bottom of the hill from the state capitol of Richmond, in Richmond. So this site, and this is really well developed from, honestly, 15 years ago when we first started working with this site. It was a parking lot because government workers, the city of Richmond is very much a government town, right? So this was actually a state parking lot. But the Lumpkins jail site, Lumpkins was a slave trader. This was the site of his hotel and his auction house. And at this hotel, so people would come and they would stay and they would eat and drink. There was a restaurant, and over here they would also be buying and selling enslaved people. So this space was a place of commerce. Now, a lot of people will tell you, historians will tell you, that Richmond was this crazy, it was just really busy enslaved people trading space. I mean, people coming from north to south, south to north. Richmond was the place where those sales occurred. And at this Lumpkins jail site, they have done archaeological digs for the last, well, like I said, like 15 to 20 years, and found so many relics from the time when this operated as a slave trading site. And we don't know what would have been owned by the enslaved people, or not owned, but possessed by the enslaved people, or possessed by the people who owned or were staying in the space. But we actually can start to, through history, there are tons of stories of the things that happened on this site. So the very idea that this place is important enough and deserves commemoration enough that they've destroyed the parking lot, have unearthed some of the original stones, that are creating interpretive signage. They're developing a museum, developing multiple spaces, program spaces throughout to tell this story. This is how far it has come. This was some of the original signage, and it's moving forward as the years go forward. But I will tell you, it is such a huge space. I think, can you imagine people who were told, well, this was nothing, we don't need to continue to tell those stories. Can you imagine now what that means to have these markers and the actual fact that a museum will be on this space, that stories will be told here, that people who had names their names will be called. That gives value to people who, when you call someone by their name and you call them the right name, that gives you some worth, right? Just call, and that call me by my name, that is actually very important, right? So, see, it's 6:33. I told Andrew, I said I'm a long talker. So, but that said, so what we'll do is we'll move faster. So that That said, same with the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis. This is actually the site where Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. And by the way, all of these places, I have been blessed enough to work on either the creation of or sustainability, which for me means a business plan, like how are you going to be a sustainable space, or an audience development. In some way, shape, or form, I've been able to work with these sites, with the staff and with the facility. Lorraine Motel was going to be demolished in the late 80s because it was known as the site of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. So people did not want to be associated with it. And some of really concerned citizens from Memphis said, no, we cannot let this be. This is a story that has to be told. It has to be preserved. Bought the building, restored the building, and opened it in 1992 as the Lorraine Motel. It looks as if it has not aged a moment from that. But I will tell you, this has actually had several renovations. This street has been, this street has been, closed off. And now this is an expansion space. So right up this berm would have been, and you see the brick wall here, that would have been where James Earl Ray stayed and shot through that window. And so this is an exhibition space now, and this all is exhibition space. So the whole building is actually a museum. If you go there, it's very well developed. And again, you're moving from a place where people really did not feel like it had value because they wanted to tuck away that story, right? You want to tuck away. You want to hide from it. But then the people who said the city, it wasn't city founders, actually it was civil rights leaders in Memphis said, no, we will not tuck away this story. We have to tell this story because it has value and it's important. This is an exhibition of prom dresses from my hometown of it's Cobb County. I'm from Fulton County, but you know. Anyway, from Cobb County, but Canadian Museum for Human Rights is in Winnipeg, Manitoba. How did a story from Cobb County get to Winnipeg, Manitoba? Well, this was the first integrated prom in the late 90s that happened in integrated, not just black and white, but all races and gender always, but all races were invited before they had separate proms, like literally separate proms. So we're talking late 90s, not that long ago. And I will say that I have seen, because I got a chance to work with this museum, the people whose prom dresses these were, they knew that they had done something special, but they didn't know it was special enough to be in a museum. And when the Canadian Museum for Human Rights people came for this story, did the oral histories with them, wanted the dresses, wanted to put this all on display, they really understood even more how big, how valuable their story was, and how important what they had done was. So that value that we can communicate with culture, unsurpassed. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine just not even knowing how much your story impacted someone and then finding out all the way up in Winnipeg, Manitoba? Have you ever been to Winnipeg, Manitoba? It is a long way away. That it's important, right? It's that important. And of course, the shining light on the hill, National Museum of African American History and Culture. Over 100 years, this museum has been talked about. Let me tell you, when we were working on the institutional plan for this museum, there is an idea whose time has come. That was the name of one of the reports from 1905, okay, to create a national colored museum. I think it was because it was advanced language in 1905. Colored was very advanced in 1905. So that said, this museum, the idea, of course, that African Americans who, I started this story with the Lumpkins jail site, right? Enslaved people whose names were changed upon entry. But now you are special enough that you get a 300,000 square foot museum, the last space on the National Mall. Wow. you matter. You mean something. That's big, right? So you can do that. You're cultural workers. That's the thing that's like, right? Like, oh my gosh, I can do that. I'm an interpretive planner. I can help people tell stories. You know, it's amazing. I'm not going backwards. Okay, culture creates place. So the Atlanta Beltline, of course, you know I had to put this in here. So this is what it looked like in 2009. This is 2017. Who's that handsome gentleman? His name's Bailey-Bryant. But this is it. This is the Atlanta Beltline in 2022. So even I show the progression because culture has made this. When you see the images of the people on the Atlanta Beltline, has anyone been on the Atlanta Beltline? No, any? You just see all the spaces and the faces of Atlanta, all kinds of different people, gender. I mean, it's everything there. And you just really feel like, oh, this is a place for me. I can be here because it's everybody is there. And you see it in the artwork. You see it in the installations, everything that happens. Again, this is a public place, a public space. And when we create these public spaces with our tax dollars, just so we're clear, you're paying taxes, it's creating these types of places. You should see yourself there. You should see yourself in these public spaces. Light rails, Birmingham, this is an underpass. And this is a space, now obviously this was a big festival day, but in reality, the Birmingham, Alabama programs this space on a regular basis with bands, light installations, really creating public spaces where everyone is welcome. And this is happening even today, even now. So how does culture create community? Has anyone heard of Heidelberg Street in Detroit? So the artist Tyree Guyton lived on Heidelberg Street. He returned in the 80s from the Army, and he experienced this, the blight. What was happening, his neighborhood was in the midst of deindustrialization. The plants were closing down. The crack epidemic was crazy, and Heidelberg was in the center of it all. And he said, you know, I know that we throw away so many things, right? So a lot of his artwork, he uses a lot of trash. He said, you know, we throw away a lot of things, but what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to let us throw away our people. I'm not going to throw away your people. And so throughout the neighborhood, he does all kinds of things. He, you know, paints a whole house with dots, right? The administration building of the Heidelberg Project is called the Dotty Waddy House. And it's all, dots. It's polka dots. It's very lovely. So you see the polka dots, and these are, discarded items. And I will say the city of Detroit sometimes likes Tyree Guyton, sometimes not so much. There's a whole thing. This is the last slide, I promise. So, what did you say?
Oh, that's my...
That's your neighborhood?
No. I'm from Atlanta, actually.
Oh,
but
yeah.
That's where our class with Andrew, that was the organization I focused on.
Oh, yeah, Project Row Houses is amazing. It's amazing. So culture creates place. And I will say with Project Row Houses, you know this is a community of over 30 shotgun or row houses. And the concept is that, from the front door to the back door, you can see all the way through, right? And the row houses, they have assembled, 7 artists came together and assembled these row houses really as an action for the community to create an art space that would welcome. It wasn't really about revitalization at that time. Instead, it was about, we're a community and we're going to serve each other. And we're going to serve each other in ways that matter. We're going to take care of our young mothers. We're going to create spaces for artists who actually have ideas to help our communities. Project Row Houses is actually a community center. When they had the freeze a few years ago during the hurricane, Project Row Houses was a distribution space. Regularly during hurricanes, for generators, You can go to Project Row Houses. When anything happens, George Floyd was born in the 3rd Ward, which is where Project Row Houses is located. And when everything, the unrest, everything was happening, people congregated peacefully at Project Row Houses because it was a safe place for them. So that said, culture is powerful. I hope I've made the point that you are powerful in the fact that you are cultural workers. You are now cultural workers. You don't have to wait until you graduate, and do graduate. You don't have to wait. You are powerful. You catalyze that power now. Use it. Okay, that's all. That's it.